To the right I have some HTML code, and to the left I have the completely blank HTML page that is the result of the code on the right. And the code on the right isn't exactly empty, but the image tag, for example, here isn't showing anything because its source attribute doesn't point to an actual image file that the browser can use to show the image. Also, the div, which is basically an HTML element for containing text or other HTML elements, but it's empty. It doesn't have anything inside it. So there are two elements, but none of them is showing anything. And there is also this script, and this script is there to show you about variables within variables. And that's what's happening to this variable here on line 14. It's a basic variable definition. We use the word var to announce that we're creating a new variable. Animal will be its name, and then it gets assigned a value. And instead of assigning it a number value or a text value as a string, I'm assigning it this rather complex thing here, which is basically nothing more than a set of 3 variables. And each of them has a name, for example, description or file name or size, and each of them has a value. So the initial value for the description variable is Boris, and for the size value, for example, is 300. So each of these 3 items, a name, a colon, and some kind of value, is the definition of a new variable, but they are bound together by these curly braces into something that we call an object. And objects are things that are known to almost all programming languages. Not exactly all of them, but objects as nothing more than just a set of names with values, a set of variables, is common to most programming languages, although sometimes they have a different name. For example, Python would call these things a dictionary, and in Arduino you might call them a struct, but object is by and far the most often used term, and it is the official term in JavaScript. So this is an object, and the curly braces here at the beginning and the end are the same curly braces that JavaScript uses to enclose the code that belongs to a function. But this time you can't put any code, any commands inside the curly braces, and that has to do with the fact that this object is these curly braces are used on a position where a value is expected. On the right hand side of an assignment like this, we need a value, and as soon as a value starts with the curly brace, JavaScript will say, okay, that should be a function. Let's see what the names and the values are for the variables within the object. Okay, so this one has 3. And then on line 16 we see how you can get oh my dear, I hadn't prepared this well enough. Let's simply fix this. How you can get one of those variables from our object. The object is stored in animal, and the name is stored in a variable within the object. So here we see the dot notation that we've seen before. We've seen serial.println, we've seen console.log, we've seen document.getElement by ID, and in all those cases it had to do with commands. The value of the variable was some piece of code that you could execute. In this case, we're simply using basic variables with simple values like text or numbers. So animal.description is simply saying start with the variable animal, then within the object that it contains, find a variable called description, and then use that as the value for this expression. So what we would expect to see in the console, and let's have a look at it, is the actual name Boris. Now my preferred way to start the developer console is simply by using a keyboard shortcut. In my case, that would be Command Option I. That's on Macs on almost all browsers. On Windows there will also be a shortcut, but I don't know what it would be. Okay, we're not seeing our console.log, but that has to do with the fact that I made a mistake and had a wrong variable name here. So if I reload the page, then I would expect things to be better. And let's see, yes. Okay, so we get here in the console, let me enlarge that for you. We get animal description : Boris, which is exactly what we were expecting given line 16. Okay, so and of course we could also print out the size and the file name, but one interesting thing to do now is animal itself and simply print out the animal. Okay, what will we get? Gonna reload it again, and now we get this, and I'm going to enlarge the browser quite a bit, because this is the usual way you get to see stuff like this. And what Chrome does is it's going to show you the object, and if it doesn't have all that much variables inside it, for example 3 seems to be working, it will try to print the entire object. But as soon as it gets 10 variables, or one of these variables has a very large value, then it will start to abbreviate stuff. I'll demonstrate in a minute. But it also has this little rectangle here to the left that I can use to expand it, and then the 3 variables will be shown each on a single line by itself, with this extra bit of plumbing under the hood that we are not concerned about. So that's one thing you can do with objects. You can pass them to functions that are capable of dealing with objects, and console.log does contain a value that can deal with objects, and in this case console.log will show us the entire contents of this thing. Let's use this with HTML. I'm going to do a document.getElement by ID for our image tag above. And then I'm going to say the source, oh dear, this should not be on. Sorry. Yes, this is where I wanted to go. I wanted the source to be here. And then I'm going to say this should be my animal.file name. And be careful with capitalization. JavaScript and Arduino and almost all programming languages really mind if you use a lowercase letter where you should have been using an uppercase, or vice versa. Okay. And let's also take the caption and change its contents to the description of the animal. One precaution I'm going to take is I'm going to also set the size, because I happen to know that the image is very large. So I'm going to say the width of the image. Sorry, my mistake. Gets element by ID image.width should be animal.size. Okay, let's see whether this works. The idea is simple enough. I'm taking the data out of the image, and then I'm putting them in different variables in other objects. I'm simply copying the data, by the way. So the source variable that lives within the object that the browser creates for this tag, will become the file name that we have for the elephant. The width for the width variable within the object that the browser creates for this image tag will be the size that we created, so it will be 300. Okay, this is going wrong. I made a little error, I know this. But one thing is interesting, I'm seeing the caption already. So there's something that's going right. And there's also something that's going quite badly wrong, because you can't really tell because of the word Boris in front of it, but there's a little gray icon saying that it couldn't find the file. And that's correct, because the actual file, let me see if I can show you, is sitting here. And it's not called elephant, it's called elephant.jpg, but a JPG. So I should add the .jpg after it, and I'm going to, like this. Let's try again. Reload, and here we are. It would have been better if the if Boris was white, so we can give him a color white. Let's do that here. Document.getElement by ID, and not image but caption. My interesting artificially intelligent browser is trying to learn. So, I'm taking the caption, and the caption, the thing that's being returned by document.getElement by ID will always be an object, much like this one, so a set of variables with values. As we've seen here, and these are all names of variables within such objects. But style is interesting, because style is one of the variables inside the object created for basically every HTML tag. But it is an object itself. It contains an object itself, and that object also has all kinds of variables for CSS properties, and I'm using the color property. Let's try this. And now we see Boris getting a white description. Okay, so that's fine. We're going to have a lot to do with objects. Objects are very important in programming. They will return with us for in a few lessons. But for now, most of all, I want you to be familiar with this kind of notation. There's a variable which contains another variable because its value is an object. And this is the way to get to the inner variable.